Hello, everyone. How are you doing? We're going to try to keep this brief, but it's going to be a little bit intense. It may be about 5-10 minutes long. This is about the newly appointed individual, Steve Mollenkopf. Actually, not new. He's been there since 2020. Here he is. Here's Steve. This title is ANSI-ANAB member Qualcomm Steve Mollenkopf named independent board chair at Boeing. And he's been there since 2020. He was an independent chair, 2024 to present. But this is where we're going to focus in on. Qualcomm Incorporated, he was a CEO between 2014 and 2021, while ANSI-ANAB sat upon the international accreditation form, which you will see was handed over to a communist Chinese national who is mandated by his country of origin, communist China, to take our data through the China National Intelligence Law, Article number 7. He has another thing, one of the many that you find on the internet when you Google Qualcomm, you find out that fix for critical Qualcomm chip flaw is making its way to Android devices. That sounds like that what happened to the Boeing door that popped off the Alaska Air. Quality issues. He has quality issues at his own organization, and they promoted him up the ladder to take over for David Calhoun, whatever that may be. But yes, Qualcomm sits on ANSI's board. Right over by accreditation bodies, ANAB that they use. They also sit over by the FTC, FBI, etc., etc., etc. IEEE. And here we go. We're going to go into this right now. So, Steve, thank you very much for coming here. But now we're going to show you the brass tacks that Boeing is producing the same baloney. Qualcomm has issues with their chips, quality issues going into Android phones. They come over here, they promote this guy since he's already on the board. They promote him, and it's just as bad as Boeing having that issue with Alaska Air. Quality issues through on both sides. So is he reliable? Absolutely not. As far as I can see, if you brought in somebody who's got, nobody will have perfect quality, but when you're putting bad parts into a phone, bad parts into a plane, I know it's not really apples to apples, but not good. Here we go. ANSI is the American National Standards Institute. It has been around for over 100 years. It is a private, not-for-profit, non-governmental corporation that has both federal agencies on board and corporations. In 2015, Randy Doty, the Vice President of ANAB, the Chairman of the IAF, which is incorporated in Delaware International Accreditation Forum, and ANAB is the American National Crediting Board. He was also the principal on the IAF tax report 990, so he had complete control over ANAB and all the rest of that. He handed over leadership to this communist Chinese national, Zhao Jinwu, who has been involved with our quality since 1994. Zhao Jinwu is also the chief executive of the China National Accreditation Services, which is in Beijing, China. In 2017, Zhao Jinwu was standing there in the Wuhan lab handing over a laboratory certification. During 2018, a contingency went over from the United States, and the lab scientists said we need more trained technicians. So he basically handed a certificate into a place that needed to have trained individuals. He just handed it and took the money. Let's continue on with this. So the scientists were crying to the United States representatives in 2018. Meanwhile, down in Texas, the vice president of ANSI-ANAB's laboratory certification, Ms. Pamela Sales, said under deposition that from one laboratory to another, there are variances. That means the release of the virus is very much prominent in the BioLevel 4 lab in Wuhan, China. In 2019, we have her deposition here. She's going to be coming up very shortly. In 2019, the CDC of May of 2019, the CDC came out with a training document for BioLevel 4 labs in China. The only laboratory mentioned in that is no other than Wuhan, China. On top of that, to make matters even more cluster crap than it is, Should I say clusterfucked? Yes, we're going to say clusterfucked because we have Patrick Shanahan in the wings, and he was asked about the Lockheed Martin F-35 program when he was Deputy Secretary of Defense, and he said, the program's fucked up. Well, let me tell you something, if I may say so, Patrick. Not only is a program, but after their 801st ship, their ship is fucked up too. So anyway, let's continue on. So 2019, the CDC comes out, and by the way, the CDC sits on ANSI's board, right over by NIH, right over by FDA, USDA, FTC, FBI, etc., DOD. And the CDC came out with this training document that stated that the most critical part of containment in any well-run lab is to have very well-trained and highly motivated technicians that are the first defense to keep the contagion in the four walls. Here is the actual deposition that Pamela did. She said one of the issues of that, and I'm going to use phlebotomy labs and also biolevel 4 labs in her deposition. One of the issues is that there is no commonly agreed upon set of standards that forensic labs, virology, biolevel 4 labs, and also phlebotomy labs around the country or world have to follow. Instead, there are informal guidelines that labs can choose to follow or not. That means the quality is out of control. And to prove this, this was a headliner. Do you see that? A major occurrence of scandals have happened in accredited labs. You also have the factor of the IAF. The International Accreditation Forum is a repository for both national and international accreditation bodies. Okay, you also have ILAC, which is, and that IAF is in Delaware. ILAC is in Australia. Okay, the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation, where ANSI-ANAB are underwriters for both those companies, both those organizations. In fact, ANSI is the founding member of the IF, so they're both in bed together. ANSI basically owns the IF. Don't let anybody kid you, as you can see down here. In 2018, ANSI took over complete control over ANAB, and they sat on the IAF, both ANSI and ANAB. And I'm going to say this. I showed you this already. Qualcomm, because Qualcomm is a member of ANSI, and ANSI is ANSI-ANAB, and because they sit so close to this mess, remember this, that this Chinese national is mandated to take your data through the China National Intelligence Law, Article number 7. And between those years of 2015 and 21, the federal agencies that sit on ANSI got their data taken. So can we say they got hacked? No, we gave them their data. They took it. And you also have ANAB and ANSI sit on each other's boards. You have 10 different registrars in China that could take, that are accredited by ANAB. To prove to you my validity and my truthfulness about this whole underwriter deal, here's the actual government contract from 2018 when our own government invited China into its four walls, because it states over here, right over here, see this? It says ANSI-ANAB is an underwriter for the International Accreditation Forum. And if you go into the contract, this is only a part of it. If you go into it, it says the company must be able to have the IAF logo on the certification as well. So they basically invited Communist China in. Now we go to Boeing. Boeing, isn't that a tender moment? Boeing sits on ANSI's board, of course, Boeing. And we're going to show you this in 2002. In 2002, they came out with a supplier bulletin. I'm not going to go into detail, but I'm going to say this very shortly. What it did is this. This Boeing bulletin said, look, if you're ANSI-ANAB accredited, okay, just send us your certification, AS9100 for aerospace. Send us your parts. And Boeing doesn't have to come do an on-site audit. You see through these placards that Boeing sits right over by the accreditation body that they stick down the suppliers' throats and subcontractors. On top of that, to prove again my validity and my truthfulness, that Mr. Stephen Mollenkopf may not know. Let's bring you out. Mollenkopf, nice to see you again, Steve. Please sit down. This is the actual article that came out and said that FAA increased the authority of Boeing's commercial airplanes division to self-certify its own aircraft. Authority extended to Boeing under the new system allows Boeing employees to perform tasks on behalf of the FAA that include oversight of testing and product standards. And this is where MCAS comes in. This is where people say, well, Boeing lied. They didn't tell the FAA about MCAS. They don't have to. They are the FAA. And include oversight of testing and product standards, along with certification of aircraft technologies. That's where MCAS is, and new aircraft designs. Also, on their portal, Boeing's portal, they have ANSI-ANAB, or international equivalent. And here's a good one. They sit on the board, the Management Systems Accreditation Committee, that can grant, suspend, and withdraw certification. All my 40 years plus in quality, I've never seen anyone get their certificate taken away except for lack of payment. On top of that, Steve, come over here. You're this new board guy. You should have opened up your mouth. This is very bad. I know it's before your time, but leopard never changes its spots. You have the factor that they were fudging documentation, Boeing was. Not under your watch, but under Calhoun's watch and Muhlenberg's watch and so many others prior to them. Are you going to do anything right? Because your company appears to be doing things wrong as well. So I guess birds of a feather reject together. So you have this issue over here. In fact, Steve, one more time, if you pop out from the woods, I'm going to say this. Just most recently, the Department of Justice, that also sits on ANSI's board, fined Boeing Bell Composite Facility in Pennsylvania $8.1 million for skipping quality processes and fudging documentation. Me being a composites guy, Kevlar, boron, graphite, fiberglass, metal matrix composites, as that's part of my education background. Time, temperature, and pressure. If you have one of those missing or fudging or whatever you're doing, you can have a situation where you have separation of fabric causing a loss of aircraft, loss of pilot, and a disaster. Who sits on their board? The FAA, who gave Boeing regulatory authority. So I'm going to ask you something, Steve. How does one regulator watch over another regulator, since you've seen firsthand that, yes, that the FAA made Boeing a regulator in 2009? And here is the Department of Justice sitting over by them. Here's the Federal Trade Commission. Here's the Department of Defense, who in 2013, 2012 and 13, signed a waiver so that China could build these specialized magnets for the F-35. Isn't that nice? And you also have the FBI and also U.S. Department of Transportation. And Steve, most of the people, being that I've been in business for 13 years and I've traveled a lot, most of these people who are AS9100 for aerospace say, Daryl, we'd love to come on board with you, but Boeing is sticking it to us. We only can use ANSI-ANAB. Well, that's breaking the Sherman-Clayton Act because I'm a registrar as well. So what happens is breaking the Sherman-Clayton Act is very easy to see, Steve. Come on out here. I will explain it to you in detail. So maybe you could do something with your board. By them having ANSI-ANAB on their supplier bulletin, that's X number 1. Restraint of trade is on their supplier portal. Okay, a monopoly is being on their board, being able to grant, suspend, and withdraw certification. So you have on the board membership, supplier portal, and also supplier bulletin. That constrains and restricts trade, Steve. So what are you going to do about it, sir? Probably nothing. But you know what they tell me? Pay to play. So I'm going to say this, Steve. I'm going to say a poem for you because it appears, as we've looked up your data, that you have issues with quality at Qualcomm. And this is for you and for Boeing as well. It is impossible, and this is from Thomas Paine, it is impossible to comprehend the moral mischief, if I may so express it, that mental lying has produced in our society, when a man has so far corrupted and prostituted the chastity of their mind as to subscribe their professional beliefs to things they do not believe. They have prepared themselves a commission for every other crash. Did I say crash? 203-556-1493 or Daryl, tqrs@yahoo.com. Steve, thanks for coming in. Have a good golf outing.